Absolutely beautiful Friday morning from here in Lagos, Nigeria, and you're welcome to Sunrise Daily, coming to you live from Channels Television here in Lagos, of course. I'm Kayode Okikelu. It's going to be a great show, definitely, today. Let me just kickstart by giving you this analysis, as it were. Two things they say are sure in life: death and taxes. And I'll stay on the latter, which is taxes. I mean, the dust of the whole VAT collection between the FIRS and River State government, or I say the federal government and River State government, is yet to settle. Just yesterday, news came out that, well, all the governors, all the states are coming together to demand stamp duties from the federal government, and they're talking from 2015 to 2020. Don't forget that prior to that as well, the state governors had asked about the funds gotten from looted funds, essentially asking the federal government to account for, I think, over 2 trillion naira. So clearly, state governments, according to some people, are beginning to wake up to their responsibilities. Now, I don't want this to be as though it is states versus federal government. It might appear as that, but essentially it's meant to be what is right, what is fair, what is equitable, and what is allowed by the Constitution. I know the narrative has been, okay, so states are against federal government, but whether you like it or not, we're in the same country, okay? It's a federation, so there shouldn't be any sort of, separation, as it were. It's what is right, what is equitable. And, the larger conversation for me, while it is good that River State government has challenged, the legality of FIRS collecting VAT, they got a judgment. FIRS says they are appealing it, but pending that time, the River State government has, of course, enacted a law and, of course, gone ahead to enforce that law. So it is good. Now, it's also good that the NGF is ensuring that, well, they sort out that whole stamp duty collection, especially for transactions that take place in their state. And if you're doing any transaction in Nigeria, I mean, you're most likely doing it in a state, except the FCT, of course. So largely, you might say that they have a case. Of course, the court is yet to schedule a date for the hearing of that suit. And of course, the talk about, looters' funds is also a good one. But the one for me, or the big story, the big picture for me, is the fact that states actually have as much power as they desire or as they demand, because over time we've come to accept that narrative that states are not powerful, states are weak, states can't do much without the federal government. But in the context of this constitution that we have, that we're operating with today, pending the amendment that is meant to come up, states can do a lot. And we've seen that tested with the FIRS or VAT collection, now with this stamp duties collection. States can actually achieve so much. So that's those are the documents of that case, as it were. And I think now should be a time that state governors will go back and say, okay, so what have we been missing, really? What can we achieve that we've not exactly looked into? Is it state police? By the way, for me, I think states can actually achieve a lot with state police. I mean, it only takes your lawmakers to go to the National Assembly and essentially push, for that bill, make it an act, and voila, not wahala, no, voila, it is done. So clearly, states have a lot of power that I think they're not leveraging on. So it's good that we're seeing these cases, and I look forward to more of them. By the way, not states versus federal government. It is what is right versus what is wrong. And essentially, we can have this fiscal federalism we're talking about. States can become more efficient, more viable. I think that's the term that is used these days. States can become more viable, and we can have, better livelihoods for people across the states, better infrastructure. I think it's the beginning of better days ahead for me, I think, pending the outcome of those court cases. But we'll keep our fingers crossed. But the state governors, I will say yet again, have so much power in their hands. Good morning, Malkwe.
Well, good morning, Kayode. Very interesting discussion which you've started this morning. And it will be very interesting to see which way the pendulum swings. I think that what is also important to clarify is whether the federal government had been remitting this to the states before now, and it was saying that they stopped somewhere, because that's the sense one seems to get with this suit that has been filed by the attorneys general of the 36 states of the Federation, because they're talking about non-remittance of the stamp duty funds generated from the state. So what needs to be clarified is whether they're fighting over the right. I don't think that this is a right matter. It will seem that the right of the states to get their funds have already been established. That's what it would seem. And that the states are now saying, you haven't remitted this fund since 2015. And what we're asking you to do is remit the funds from 2015 up till now, which is a long time to have been sleeping on your rights, if you ask me. But never, it's better late than never. So let us see what the clarification on that will be. I mean, it's a little different from the VAT matter, where it will seem that what was in question was the question of rights. Who has the right to collect VAT? And I think that is, as enshrined in our Constitution, it is not on the exclusive list, and it will seem that that was a talking point, and that's why the courts ruled in favor of the River State government. We will see what will happen in the appeal court and whether that will be upheld. But in the meantime, that's what stands. The FIRS says they've gone to court to go and appeal that. We also saw a meeting of the JTB yesterday. But let us see, that's a joint tax board. So let us see how these matters pan out. But in this particular instance, it does seem that a question of right is not in contention here. Whether or not states are entitled to stamp duties is not in question here. What seems to be missing is that the federal government has not been remitting these taxes to the state government. So I don't know. Until we get a little bit more clarification, that's what we can read from the surface. So it'll be interesting to see how these matters pan out, especially now that it has been taken to court. I think it's always easier to, I mean, why they would let it wait for 6 years? This is federal government that is borrowing heavily already. We're already taking, calling to question the humongous amount of debt that we have and the low profile of our revenue generation. So there'll be questions as to if the courts do rule in favor of the state, where will the federal government get the funds to pay? But I mean, we'll see how matters pan out. I mean, revenue is revenue. If it is their right, it is their right. But we'll ask the state, why have you slept on your right for this long? That's the question that we need to ask. But all of this, Kayode, calls to question whether, I mean, or brings to mind those who say that our Constitution is not the problem. It is the operators of the Constitution. Don't forget that we've had this debate over and over again anytime restructuring comes up as to whether or not we have fully implemented the Constitution. There are those who argue that even within the ambit of the current Constitution, states have sufficient powers to be autonomous, to be independent of some, you know, financially independent. I think that's the word I'm looking for. To be financially independent, and that they haven't explored, you know, all the loopholes or all the lacunas that this particular Constitution, the 1999 Constitution, fraught with its fault as it is. We haven't really implemented it. However, you know, we keep asking for a new one, and that's why those people still want. Now, don't be deceived. You might get a new Constitution saying all that you wanted to say, but if you do not put it to use, you will still be back at square one. So it's a good thing as states are waking up to their rights. I hope that they're also waking up to their responsibilities to their people, and that the people too should wake up. You know, because when you travel the length of this country, when you travel the length and breadth of this country, and you see how endowed we are as a people, you really cannot reconcile, you know, our topography with our poverty. It is mind-boggling. You have to ask, how can we be so blessed and yet be where we are in terms of what God has given us, in terms of the intellect, in terms of the natural endowment? How can it be possible that a country we have so much? Is it in agricultural produce? Is it in terms of mineral resources? Is it in terms of the people? I mean, really, there are huge questions as to what we've done to ourselves and why it is that we've been sleeping on our rights as a people and not dominating as we are created to do. But let us see whether this will wake us up, all, not just the governors, but also the people as well, to, you know, to take them to task, to say, do more because you can. you know, to empower your people, to leverage on what it is that you've been naturally endowed with. Let us see how this case eventually pans out. Coyote.
Oh, absolutely, Mark. And let me just mention the pivotal role that the judiciary is playing in all of this. And I think for the governors, one of the reliefs they'll be hoping to get is the first one that says a declaration that the plaintiffs are the sole authorities entitled to administer and collect stamp duties on all transactions involving individuals within their respective states. So clearly all eyes on the states. But let's shift our attention to the dailies this morning and run you through what's making the headlines. That's in a moment. Oh yes, we have turned our attention now to the front page of the dailies, but guess what? The conversation is still the same. Let's begin with Vanguard newspaper with this lead. Tax war worsens as 36 states sue FG over stamp duty. There you go. So clearly, there's a thread this morning. 176 billion naira stamp duty revenue refund from FG. Corporate executives express misgivings over stamp duty war. More knocks come on VAT controversies. FG should stop impeding true federalism. Afenifere. Businesses face harassment over VAT face-off. LCCI. State's collection of VAT may curb interstate migration. Ixan. So, it's a big one, definitely. Page 5 should perhaps give you all the information you need on that one. And there you see the big picture on the front page. Buhari in Imo, and he's flanked by the governors of Ebonyi, of course the host governor, Hope Uzodinma, as well as leaders of the Southeast. You have the President General of Ohanaeze Ndigbo, you have the Obi of Onitsha, you have the Secretary General of Ohanaeze Ndigbo, and under that you see Ohanaeze to Buhari, release Igbo youths detained by security agents. So that's the message, at least one of the messages they had from the president. More details on page 13. And I think the president's visit on different levels speaks volumes. And clearly we'll be hoping to see what that will yield in the coming days. There's also that Lagos Assembly passing anti-open grazing and VAT bills. Page 9 will definitely be giving you more insight into that one on the show this morning. And let me see, I'm actually spoiled for choice what to choose on the front page. You see, students' abduction, Nigeria's future under threat, UN tells FG. So just in case we may have overlooked that or just thought, well, another day, another abduction, or another week, another abduction. Clearly, this has ramifications, not just for today, but for the future. And it's better we pay a lot of attention to it. It's on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. I'll just take one more before I flip this over to Abuja. Apapa gridlock. Is Governor Sanwo-Olu helpless despite seizing control of traffic management? That has been a headache, a migraine, some might even say cancer, that has lasted for so long. Page 11 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. There's sports, of course, on the back page. You see why I bench Iheanacho. Leicester boss explains. Which a lot of Nigerians were not happy about that, but he's given some explanation. So will that do for you? More details on the inside pages. Let's leave it there for Vanguard this morning.
Well, let's take a look at The Guardian for you, and they have a similar headline. Amid VAT uproar, states sue federal government over sharing of stamp duties. Surprise trails speedy passage of Lagos VAT open grazing bills. Wike started a revolution. Restructuring has begun, says Adigboruwa. Oyo still studying VAT verdict. Kaduna says it won't go against federal government court decisions. Kano keeps mute as stakeholders bemoan declining IGR. Stop impeding true federalism, Afenifere tells federal government. It's all on page 6 of the paper. A lot of riders to this particular story. Amid VAT uproar, states sue federal government over sharing of stamp duties. They have a lot more. FX market faces fresh test as Naira hits all-time high at 543 Naira to the dollar. Hoarding intensifies while BDC operators run out of supply. Banks may resort to rent-seeking No customer with genuine need has been turned back, CBN insists. Proposed e-Naira will stabilize financial system. So you read all of that, but this is really worrying. Naira at 543 Naira to the dollar. And look at this, businesses, residents, Sean Ozodinma ground emo as Buhari visits. They have that on page 27 of the paper. They have a number of other stories at the bottom of the nameplate for you there. INEC recognizes Ozigbo as PDP candidate for Anambra Guber poll. That's PDP candidate, yeah. That is also on the front page as well. Let's leave it there for The Guardian.
Next up is Nigerian Tribune with this one. As Lagos Assembly passes VAT anti-open grazing bills, Afenifere SAN backs states over VAT battle with FIRS. It's on page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune. That one doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. And just on top of the nameplate, you see that one. 36 states sue FG over stamp duty remittances, page 5. And then there's politics for you, the PDP party politics. PDP NEC defers decision on zoning. That has been one of the major questions, or at least major, do I say, calculations or permutations that seem to be top on the conversation. Fintiri heads PDP Convention Planning Committee. Makinde emerges Secretary. Ugwuanyi Zoning Committee Chairman. PDP only party that can survive big crisis. Atiku. It's on page 8. Clearly the party is talking big ahead of the 2023 elections. But let me just give you this one that we may have overlooked. I mean, the course of different stories that we've been having break past few days. FG addressed only 2 of our 8 demands, ASU. So I interpret that to mean, well, if 6 demands are outstanding, then there might be a call for strike anytime soon. So what? The health sector, now the education sector. It's on page 28, lest we forget. And there's highlight of the Lagos anti-open grazing bill still on the front page for you this morning. And some cheery news, you might say. Amotekun rescues 9 of 12 travelers abducted in Ondo, page 26 of the paper. Of course, you have sports on the back page, and this one is worth mentioning. Amusan breaks jinx at Diamond League. First Nigerian to actually win Diamond League title. So yeah, great one for her, really, we must say. That's Nigerian Tribune.
Has this one. Suicide on the rise as Nigeria records 51 cases in 12 months. Poverty, drugs, marital instability, insurgency responsible. That's according to doctors. Governments, employers, landlords, families must act fast. You might be wondering who's speaking. Just in case you want to see, it's a page 4 read. Suicide on the rise as Nigeria records 51 cases in 12 months. I think time was when we would say that, Nigerians do not commit suicide. But it looks like that is changing now, and mental health is now a big deal. So this story is certainly an important one, at least big enough for the Daily Trust to put it on as its front page story this morning. Look at this one. 120 bandit gangs operate with 60,000 AK-47 rifles in 6 northern states. That's according to a study. 12,000 persons killed, 250,000 livestock rustled in Zamfara. Motorcycles donated by politicians used for attacks. So that's what you find on the front page of the Daily Trust. They also have, look at this, doubt over NNPC's viability as liabilities exceed assets by 4.6 trillion naira. Now, to put the story in context for you, the NNPC recently declared a profit. And there were questions as to exactly what has happened to the liabilities. So there'll be questions as to whether or not there was truly, or there was, who are we to question? But if the NNPC has been under recovering and there was no provision made for subsidies in previous budgets, but somehow we have been subsidizing the cost or the price of petrol, and then all of a sudden we hear that the NNPC has declared profits, I think that the questions are in order, and I think that the NNPC does need to provide some clarity and some answers to these questions. So page 24 might give you perhaps more questions than answer. And look at this. GSM network shut down in 13 local government areas in Katsina. Naira hits 550 naira to the dollar as EFCC warns banks against forex fraud. Well, another paper had 543 naira. But hey, it's inching towards 550, and sometimes the price in the parallel market depends on where you're buying from. So you might want to see details on page 23 of the paper. Southeast leaders promise to remain in Nigeria as Buhari visits Imo. So page 10 read. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust newspapers.
Well, the Daily Times front page is quite interesting this morning, and there you see, I mean, picture worth 1,000 words, you might say. And the caption is, "How I Want to Be Remembered" by Buhari. It's a page to read, but of course, the front page has, a picture for you, just to give you enough teasing. And of course, that story about FG addressed only 2 of our 8 demands coming from ASU is also a big deal. And this is very important, because when you look at the top of the nameplate that says "School Abductions, Nigeria's Future Under Threat," says UN. And then you have this one about perhaps an impending strike. Clearly, education will be under major attack from not just primary, secondary, even the tertiary level as well. So you wonder what's going on with education in the country. So it's a big one. Perhaps for me, it will even be the big story for most of the dailies, or at least my own version of the daily. There's also the PDP story on politics. Court declines halting secondus removal. So yeah, that's the latest one. And a couple of other stories make the front page of the Daily Times. Let's leave it there.
Friday has this one, Leadership Conference and Awards. Yes, they had theirs yesterday. Oshibajo, Sultan, others proffer solutions to security challenges. Elite promoting insecurity in Nigeria. That's attributed to the Vice President. God did not make a mistake bringing us together. That's according to the Sultan. AFDB special funds coming for Nigeria. Others, that's attributed to Adeshino. Sanwo-Olu, Abdulrazak, Obaseki, Wike, Mustafa, others. Lord Awards want Ndazaya's legacies sustained. The vision started in our bedroom. That's according to the chairman of Leadership newspapers. Well, that's where most ideas come from. Isn't that so? Well, you might want to see details on page 4 of the paper. You also have this one, PMB promises Imo more federal projects. Yeah, that happened on his visit yesterday. A number of other stories at the bottom there. Fintiri Ugwanye to decide PDP convention zoning. That's there. And they also have this one, state to federal government over non-remittance of stamp duty funds. So all of it on the front page of Leadership Friday for you this morning. Let's leave it there for the paper.
Well, Mark, I remember how you commended the banks for the successes they've recorded in recent times. Well, the front page of Nigerian News Direct speaks to that effect. Assets of banks hit 53.64 trillion naira. That's according to the CBN, but the Riders says economic recovery remains very weak, fragile, it's according to an expert. Development finance interventions hits 326.22 billion naira in July. But that's not all you find on the front page of the News Direct. Just on top of that nameplate, you see Nigeria not yet qualified by WHO to produce vaccines. It's according to NAFDAC. You know, there's been a lot of conversation about how Nigeria should be able to produce vaccines. And don't forget I think the idea that even, developing countries should be able to at least borrow technology for vaccine production so that they can have it cheaper or at least readily available. So, when you see that one from NAFDAC, you wonder, what's the way forward? Well, at least on the show, the way forward is we're taking a break now, and when we return, we'll delve into the issues for the day. You don't want to miss this. Stay with us.
It's an issue that has turned controversial in recent months as states begin to push for the collection of value-added tax. And one of the states victorious in this cause is Rivers, which recently got a court judgment in its favor. Disagreements on VAT has long been an issue between the Lagos State government and the Federal Inland Revenue Service even before Rivers State was liberated. The the Lagos State government is progressing towards taking charge of its own VAT collection after the House of Assembly passed a bill for a law to impose and charge value-added tax on certain foods and services.
Something as I move that a bill for a law to impose and charge value-added tax on certain goods and services, provided for the administration of the tax and for other related matters, be read for the third time. I so move.
A bill for a law to impose and charge value-added tax on certain goods and services, provide for the administration of the tax and for connected purposes, be passed into law. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those against nay. The ayes have it.
One other contentious issue dealt with is the anti-open grazing, as Lagos State also passed a law banning it, towing the line of several other states.
To prohibit open cattle grazing and the trespass of cattle on land in Lagos State, I so believe.
That a bill for a law to prohibit open cattle grazing in Lagos State, the trespass of cattle on land, and for other connected purposes be passed into law. All in favor say aye. Aye. Against nay, the ayes have it.
The two bills were passed after unanimous votes by the lawmakers and copies transmitted to the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, for assent.
Well, that's what we're certainly discussing. That happened yesterday in the Lagos State House of Assembly. Don't forget that that comes against the backdrop of Southern governors meeting in Asaba and saying that they were going to pass a bill against open grazing. They gave themselves a September 1 deadline to do that. So Lagos is like the latest in the line on the list of states, especially southern states, that have passed a law against open grazing. Also on the back of the judgment that came for Rivers State from a federal high court in the state, granting the right to the Rivers State government to collect the VAT, Lagos has also enacted laws to enable it collect VAT in the state as well. Now, these two laws were passed, well, rather speedily, in a matter of days, as a matter of fact. And you heard some of the reasons that were given there by the state assembly members. They said they're going to be passing this on to the state governor for assent. We'll see how that eventually moves on. But before now, there had been some worries on the part of the cattle herders, especially Macban. They have an association, Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria. Even though they are factionalized, there is a faction which is threatened to take this, threatened to sue state governments. There is another faction that has said they are going to work with the state governments, but they have also expressed some worry in terms of what is going to become of their businesses. We have this morning two gentlemen here in the studio. Bulus Atsen is the chairman of the Nigeria Bar Association here in Abuja. And then we also have with us Mr. Usman Baba Ngerzama, who is the national secretary of the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria. Gentlemen, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us.
Well, quite a bit of background to provide to our viewers this morning, but I think it's very important that they understand the context, even though I imagine that those who have been following the news who would have been able to, put into context what is happening. But just in case anyone has missed any part, this is a situation that we have today. Lagos State has joined a number of states that have passed the anti-open grazing bill into law. Let me first of all ask you, Sir Baba Ngerzama, how, because I do know that I think it was your association that made an appeal to the Lagos State government. Was it your own association? Because we do know that there's Miyetti Allah Kauta Hore and there's yours. Are they a faction of your group, or how is your relationship with them?
No, it's never a faction. It's a duly registered association, just like the Magban. Though we have large followership, and we are in existence for nearly 40 years now. And ours is a democratic one. We came in through election, and we definitely go out through election. But the other group are there, duly registered by the CSE. We always wonder why the CSE will even accept to register in the same name for the same purpose. But because the security situation, what our members are going through now, is what concerns us. So in-house fighting is not our priority now. All we want to see is how our members can coexist peacefully with the farmers across the country, because Magban has branches in the 36 states of the Federation and in most of the local governments. So we have members living across every part of Nigeria for decades. In fact, some were born and brought up there. I can correct the minds of some Yoruba leaders who misquoted me, and the other time I granted interview to Arise TV, alleging that I want to claim my members of Fulanis to claim the Yoruba ancestral land. I've never said that. All I said that was there are Fulanis whose parents were born and brought up in those areas. Go to Ogun and Oyo, you find a lot of them there who only understand Yoruba and Fulfulde. Does that make them Southerners? No. They know they are Northerners, and they are seen as one, and they know they are one. They are Northerners. It's just like the Igbos we have living in Kano, and the Yorubas we have living in Plateau and Kano. They are there. Their parents were born there. They are brought up there. But does that make them Northerners? No. They see themselves as Southerners, no matter how long they will stay there. And the entire community also sees them as Southerners. But the fact that they were born and brought up there, that makes them indigenous of those areas. Let me give you an example. I have one family in my village in Gelzarma, where I was born and brought up. I have a family of Adele Ainde. I grew up and saw them there. We attended the same primary school with the children. Adele was my mate. We attended the same primary school. He went to Damatru Secondary School. He was given indigent of my local government, Fune and Gelzarma. He later died after graduating and taking the service of the custom. But Tony and Bose are still living in Gelzarma. They have enjoyed our indigenship. They have taken the employment of our local government. They are still there. Tony has already retired, but she's still living in Gelzarma, speaking her Yoruba language, practicing her Christian religion. Can we allow somebody to go and touch her today? No, we see her as one of us. She's still living there with her children, and Bose too. They are there. So, but that notwithstanding, did this make them Northerners? No. They still see themselves as Southerners, Yorubas from the South. We also see them as one. But that does not stop us from recognizing them as our own indigenous, because we grew up together, we saw them there. So
it's a tricky one, because I do know that that's something that has been a bone of contention in many instances in Nigeria. You know, people have said that we should ditch indigenship and, you know, embrace residency as the way to recognize where people are from. But I mean, that we'll see how that influences this particular discussion. What I'd like to know is how when the Southern governors reached their resolution, what were the immediate reactions of your own association?
Well, you see, we as civilized people, we know that the state governors have the responsibility of their areas. We know that they are the chief security officers of their state, and we know that the Land Tenure Act arrested the power for utilization of land to governors, to those states. We very much know that, and we very much know that the houses of assembly in respective states are responsible for making laws affecting the socio-economic activities of that particular state. We all know this as civilized people. So where a law is made by a body that is constitutionally recognized to make laws, what can you say? Whether good or bad, a law is there. But the processes is what we always have problems. In the processes, if a law is going to be made in a particular community, that law is supposed to bring peace and harmony. That is why laws are made in communities, to foster peace and harmony in that particular community. So, and those that can be affected by the law, directly or indirectly, are normally invited for dialogue under what you call it public hearing, so that they can also view their own interests, they can make people understand how they live, how they practice their trade, so that they can also be, the activity can also be protected by that law. But in most places where the law is made, our members are not taken alone as critical stakeholders, because the anti-open grazing law directly affects our members. So where they are going to be affected as Nigerians, I think their interests must also be covered by the law to some extent.
So what I understand is that you're saying you didn't get any invitation from the state governments?
In some of the states,
yes,
our members are invited, but in Lagos in particular, I saw our members attending the public hearing. But you know, Lagos has a peculiar problem, because you don't find a lot of pastoralists in Lagos. I think we have them in not more than 1, 2, 3 local governments. But the cow merchants normally buy cow in their large numbers, bring them to Lagos, keep them in the forest. After 2, 3 months, they bring them to the market and sell. And those are not necessarily Fulanis. Though Miete Allah Cattle Breeder Association is for every cattle breeder across the country, whether you are Fulani or not. If you take our cat to become a member, you automatically become our member if you rear cattle. So you find a lot of these merchants keeping cows in outskirts of Lagos. Then after a while, they bring them to the market and sell. Lagos law has invited our members as critical stakeholders to come and air their views. So we are now waiting for the outcome and seeing whether the interests of those members are protected or not. Secondly, people are talking of ranching. We are never opposed to any form of settlement that can bring peace, because we know settling the pastoralists is the only way out of this crisis we have. Because you cannot continue with what you are doing 50 years back and still continue to do it today in the modern world of today. That means there's no progress. So we know that change is necessary. Change is always there for us, whether we like it or not. So, but you have a pastoralist society that has not changed from the primitive system of animal husbandry that is practicing 50 years back, is still doing the same thing. Why? It's not his own fault, because there was no attempt by the first succeeding administration to try to modernize, to teach him how to modernize his trade. So he's still practicing the only thing he knows and the only thing he believes in doing, roaming the wild, looking for free pasture. But this era is about to be over now, considering the growth in population of both animal and human beings against a land that doesn't increase. So there has to be a way on how to plan these things for the pastoralists and the farmers to coexist peacefully. And ranching has so many models. Let me give you an example of one. The New Zealand ranch model. They call it Maori land settlement model. That Maori land settlement model involves the development of the entire grazing reserve, so leaving the pastoralists to continue to live in their traditional local setting, but within a confined area that is called ranch, where pasture and no water will be provided. So there are so many models to ranch. It's not, most of our pastoralists are smallholder farmers. They cannot afford to go for the modern ranch that everybody is looking for in this country. They don't have the education, they don't have the skills, and even the number of the cows they have cannot allow them to venture into this type of modern ranching that we always agitate for, because it's capital intensive. How many cows do they have? All these cows that you see, 100, 200 with families living, moving with them, belongs to the entire family. If it is going to be shared, nobody will get more than 50 cows out of that number, because they inherited it, and they also want to die and leave more cows for their family, for their children to also inherit, because they don't bloody care with the quality of the cow. What they care much is the quantity, because they got them through inheritance, so they want to die and leave more cows for their children to also inherit, because the your society your status in the society you live is always determined by the number of cows you have. The more cows you have, the more big man you become in the society you live. So these are things that the public must know.
Indeed, and certainly must put in context as the conversation proceeds. So let me ask you, Mr. Atsen, because even though Mr. Ngazarma has, differentiated his own association from the other association, Mieti Ala Kauta Hore, we cannot dismiss, how will I put it now, the words of the other Mieti Allah group that have threatened to sue. Perhaps, we can listen to parts of that particular, of the conversation, of the press conference which they granted, threatening to sue the states, saying that what they were doing was illegal. They had some pretty strong words for the states. I'm wondering, as a lawyer, when you saw that particular track, how did it hit you?
Well, first we need to put the issues in proper perspective. The State House of Assembly, which seeks to enact a law banning or restricting open grazing, just as Mr. Usman said, is doing so within its constitutional powers. And if there are people or group of people who feel strongly or however convicted they are that the law infringes on their rights as citizens of Nigeria, they reserve the right to go to court. So if going to court is the option that they've taken, I will say kudos to them. That's the right thing to do. However, talking about the law banning open grazing reserve, open grazing, it's something that is a long time coming. It didn't just happen. There are issues which precipitated the enactment of this law. Benue State enacted it since 2017. It was clear that so many other states were going to take a cue from that. If the issues that encouraged Benue to take that path continued in those other states. So it wasn't surprising when the southern states' governors came together and decided on this path as a solution to the myriads of crises that were generated as a result of open grazing. So going to court, to me, it's okay.
Yeah, but I do not know if you saw that particular video. Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. I watched it.
I mean, the language was a bit aggressive. Do you think that it was, does it already say what is going to happen in court, for instance? I mean, and the stance and the mode, or let's say the mood of those who are going to court. I don't know, because this is supposed to bring peace. It's supposed to be a solution to a problem. Lives have been lost. Conflict keeps on, keeps happening. People are displaced from their homes. Properties are burnt and lost and this is happening amongst farmers, it's happening amongst herdsmen. We've had to question whether this is just a local problem, or whether this has an international face to it, or maybe this is also being fueled from some other areas. So if this is the solution which the governors are proposing, and this is also the vehemence you're getting on some other parts in terms of the language of going to court, do you really think that this is going to bring the proposed peace which this law is supposed to enforce?
Well, in most cases, change doesn't come easily. There are bound to be some resistance. There are bound to be objections and protests from here and there. The Mieti Allah groups, both the Cattle Breeders Association and the Kautal Hore group, over the years, in my view, have not really engaged critical stakeholders in the area of cattle rearing, with the view to finding solutions to the crisis that have come up over the years. In most cases, what you see, it's a stiff resistance, just as the Kautal Hore group is posing. So instead of engaging stakeholders with the view to finding a holistic solution, they usually take a combative position. It is just of recent that you find the cattle that's Magban engaging with governors, trying to find solution. Like in the case of Lagos, they're pleading for more time to educate their members on how to rear cattle, either in ranching or in reserves or whatever name you call it. But in most cases, you see a stiff resistance, threats, and use of all kinds of foul and uncouth language.
So this is the situation right now in Lagos, where, you know, at least you did admit that you did see Macban there, and they asked for more time. That doesn't seem to have been taken into consideration, given that now the law has been passed. If this is really supposed to bring peace, how do you think enforcement will not cause conflict?
Well, it will depend. The fact that the law will be made anytime soon does not necessarily mean that, how do you put it now, that it can have a transition phase, let's say within a span of 6 months, 10 months, or 1 year. This and this and this will be done. So that will give time for the pastoralist. I mean, that will take into consideration the plea or the request of Magban to give their members opportunity to be acquainted with modern practices of either ranching or being stationed in grazing areas, as it were.
Well, I'm just a little curious. For the states that have passed this anti-open grazing law, how has it been for your members operating in those states? We understand a number of them have had to leave to other states, but if it's going to now happen in the generality of southern states, how is that going to impact the productivity of your members and the businesses? Because some people also say that this is also culture of your members.
And this is the question we always ask. How our members are going to be treated if a law is passed by a particular state, because we had the bitter experience of Benue. Has the law in Benue solved the problem? Up till today, we have conflict in Benue. So that means the law has not solved the problem, because the Benue law says anti-open grazing prohibition, and ranching establishment. So two things are involved there: the establishment of ranches and the ban on open grazing. So one must come before the other. So ideally, the ranching establishment has to come first before you enforce. But what we saw in Benue right from the onset was the enforcement was even setting the machinery for the establishment of ranchings. So that put us into what we have today in Benue State, crisis after crisis. Farmers and pastoralists losing their lives, losing their properties and everything that they have. For years, IDPs are maintained in Benue. People are not allowed to go and farm. And you know, Benue is a farming state. They depend very much in farming, just like the pastoralists also depend in cattle rearing. So the law is never a win-win situation, as Autumn said when he was implementing the law. He said it is going to be a win-win. Who is winning in Benue today? Are the farmers winning from that law, or the pastoralists? Both of them are suffering. Both of them are losing lives and properties. So the law did not solve the problem. So this is what we are cautioning the other southern governors to understand. Go and appraise the Benue law and see, has it helped in solving the problem? It has not.
There are two states that passed the law at that time, Benue and Ekiti. The situation is not as complex in Ekiti.
It's not complex in Ekiti, because in Ekiti, during the time of 5G, we were there, they understood the dynamics of the crisis. They understood who the pastoralist is. They know that is a person that is not educated and he's practicing the only thing that he knows. So Ekiti, I think, has tried to take into consideration the plights of the pastoralists, like Ogun and Osun. Osun also, even without the law, Osun is peaceful because the governor has done so many things that involves the participation of both farmers and herders and the security agencies in all the local governments. When conflicts arises, there is a committee that always mitigates immediately between the two. So these are the involvements that we always call for, because these pastoralists, whether we like it or not, are Nigerians. They are not foreign pastoralists, they are Nigerians. They move to the southern parts of the country not intentionally to go and stay there, but in search of pasture and water, because all the grazing reserves we have are located in the northern part of the country. About 415 of them are all located in the northern part of the country, covering about 5 million hectares of land. They are all located in the northern part of the country. But the fact that they are not maintained very well, the water is not there, and the palatable grass that the cow consumes is giving way to unpalatable ones because of lack of maintenance of the grazing reserves. Because normally the cows come out hungry from the dry season. So with the second week of rainfall, immediately the new grasses begin to come out. They were forced to go and feast on new grasses, and by feasting on them, they remove them from their roots. So they are not allowing them to drop seeds for next season. So this made the grazing reserve bare. The palatable grasses are giving way to unpalatable ones. The dams that are there are silted. They no longer hold water. So this forced the pastoralists to move in search of water and pasture. That is what took them to the southern part of the country where they can find water. So if those grazing reserves can be developed, we know settlement is the only option. We always say it. Settling the pastoralists is the only option for them to also enjoy, like any other Nigerian, to enjoy the social amenities, to enjoy pump water, to enjoy education, to enjoy electricity. But the way they are living now, they live in the forest, vulnerable place, open for attack by all sorts of things. And they live with the entire family there, with all they have in this world. So you cannot expect a person living with all he has, the cow and everything, the family, everything he has, living in the forest. You cannot expect this guy to go and cause problem for him to be killed or his cow also killed. So, I mean, people should understand the dynamics of this crisis. People should understand the type of pastoralists we have in this country. People will have to understand how they operate as the only thing they know, because there was no attempt by the past administration to try to modernize their trade. So they are doing the only thing that they know.
Yeah. Let me come to Mr. Atsenwa now, because I see you, Atsen rather, I see you, you know, shaking your head, and I do not know whether it is in terms of what he's saying or is it in terms of the context, because it does seem like in some cases this law has been passed, and as he pointed out, conflict still remains. If you were to advise a governor based on you know, some of the difficulties and perhaps maybe the experiences that we've seen for the states who passed it far earlier on, what were some of the changes? What would you have recommended, saying, as they were passing the law, in order to bring true and lasting peace?
Okay, first, let me correct an impression that Mr. Usman has been making, which is that previous administrations have not taking any steps to change the way of life or the worldview of the pastoralist. In 1989, the government at the time created the National Commission for Nomadic Education. And if you look at the functions of that commission in its establishment law, it provides for a holistic reorientation of the pastoralist. And interestingly, I stand to be corrected, but the commission all along has been headed by people who understand the way of life of the pastoralist. Some of them have passed through that phase and have what it takes to help affect or influence the change in the worldview of the pastoralists. But that hasn't been achieved. You would want to ask, has the commission been funded over the years? What has it done? What are the achievements it has made? What landmarks can we identify as an evidence of its discharging its duties?
So this was not because the Nigerian government didn't see that this could be a potential problem in future when they created that agency. The problem is that, as with most government agencies, it's either underfunded or, attention was shifted away to other issues. So should we hold government responsible for this?
Absolutely. The government has the primary responsibility for the protection of lives and property, for the provision of welfare for the citizens. And a structure was put in place for that purpose by the creation of the commission, but it hasn't lived up to its expectations. And I doubt if it is still doing that. I mean, just look at it. In all these conversations, we've not taken into account that particular commission. Interestingly, a particular section of the Act states that the commission could create some kind of a stakeholder committee, some technical committee which involves Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Culture and Tourism, Information, which will liaise with state governments for the purposes of addressing some of the concerns that the members have raised in terms of giving attention to the pastoralists, settling them down in some kind of a ranch or things like that. But how have we achieved that? That was why I talked about organizations like MAGBAN not engaging with state governments productively. In most cases, it's combative. I mean, just look at the interview that was granted by the Miati Allah Kautol Hore group. With all that they have said, have they created room for some kind of productive engagement with, let's say, the government of Ondo State? The answer is no.
Let's quickly flip this to my colleague in Lagos. He has questions.
Well, thank you, Mark. Let me begin with Mr. Ngezama, because I get a sense that perhaps there's little understanding between both parties. So, I mean, and I'd like to know if you perhaps appreciate or understand the position of the governors. So you say that, well, they've not taken into consideration the plight of the pastoralists. And for the governors, they say, well, these laws essentially are meant to ensure that there's security, at least a law that defines the rules of engagement, rules of business, essentially. So it's meant to provide security, ensure some decorum or some order in the way the business is conducted, and of course have some form of ramifications when there are infractions. So do you understand or appreciate the position of the state governors? I mean, they are meant to be chief security officers in their state. They're essentially meant to be on top of any situation. And security has been a major issue, especially as a result of those conflicts we've seen between pastoralists and farmers. So I just want to know, do you fully appreciate the position of the state governors, the southern state governors, I should say?
Well, long as they are doing it objectively, we'll have no cause to not to agree with them. But where behind the law is politics, it's not going to provide the solution required. The governors have met, they have voiced out their intentions, and some have even started doing it. If you can follow me some days back, when they started this thing, I called on the northern governors to open discussion with their southern counterparts so that together, because all the pastoralists are supposed to be northerners, coming from the north to the southern part of the country. So if the southern governors are uniting on behalf of their people, why can't the northern governors also come together and discuss with their southern counterparts? Say, hey, these guys, this thing that we have started, this is the way we are going to do it, because you also have your indigenous living in the northern part of the country doing their legitimate business. Cow is not like a merchandise that you can put in a store and lock. Cow is an animal. It's an animal. It needs water and food to survive on daily basis. So cow is not something that you can lock up and say, it's all right for my merchandise, I will sell it at the time I like. Cow requires attention and feeding. Leaders have responsibilities on animals too, the way they have responsibilities on human beings as well. So this will say the northern governors can, why didn't they come together with their southern counterparts? After all, they have a forum that is being chaired by the governor of Ekiti State. He is the chairman, Nigerian Governors Forum. Why can't they, under this forum, try to sort out their things so that they could come with something common that can work for both farmers and herders across the country? Something that will create peace once and for all by understanding the plight and the system of trade of both farmers and herders. I say this, the dynamics of Nigerian pastoralists are not well understood by the Mr.
Ngazama, I'll still stay with this point of understanding between both parties. So I get a sense that you think that this law is meant to lock up the cattle, because you say cattle cannot be locked up. I'm sure you've looked through those laws. Is there any part that says cattle is meant to be locked up in those laws? I hope you got me, Mr. Ngazama.
So a law banning open grazing is in place now. So what other contingencies do they have for the pastoralists in the interim?
Sorry, forgive me, Mr. Ngazama, just so that we can, forgive me, I didn't quite get your answer from the start. So please, if you could just go over it again so we put this in proper context. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Ngazama, can you hear me?
Because both of them, both the farmers and are suffering from it. But if the
audio keeps going back and forth. Help me out here, Mr. Ngazama. Please go ahead with your response.
Do you want?
Let's go ahead.
Tell me.
I can hear you now. Okay, the question is, understanding yet again, which I started with. You say that cattle cannot be locked up. I just want to be clear on that one. Is there any part in the laws across the states that says your cattle should be locked up?
If you come up with a law that bans open grazing, how do you expect the pastoralists to move away with their source of livelihood? How do you expect them to survive in those states? What have you in place for them, at least before the full implementation of this law? They should be confined in a particular area for grazing, at least, for them to understand fully the dynamics of the law before they could venture into it. Whoever refuses to venture into this, a law is there. Penalty.
Okay. So you're saying that the laws, pardon me, so you're saying the law does not say lock your cattle up.
Guidelines
forgive me, if I could just come in here. So you're saying that the laws don't say lock the cattle up, but you agree that the laws say at least do some form of ranching, at least put them in a space. So are you against ranching?
What type of ranching?
Ranching is, I mean, I think the definition
ranching
is quite
has so
clear.
many models. What type of ranching?
Okay, so what model
I told you
are
earlier,
you for?
Yeah, I can hear you. You say what?
Yes. I said, what model of ranching? How do you understand ranching?
models. There's the one that involves the owner getting land, providing his own pasture and water in that land, which is capital intensive. All the pastoralists we have in the country are smallholder farmers who cannot afford the capital intensive system of ranching. But I earlier on spoke about the New Zealand ranching model that involves the development of the entire forest for the pastoralists to continue to live in their local settings, but don't dare go out of that area that is confined as a ranch. Government can do that. Government can begin to even get revenue from this system. Let them convert their forests into these big ranches so that pastoralists will be paying some sort of amount to the government so that they will continue to stay in that forest doing their the only thing that they know. Then gradually, when they understand fully how the modern ranch can be done, then they can gradually begin to acquire their own land, move into the other system of ranching for them to have their land, their few cows that are productive against the ones that they have today. We have a cow that gives an output of 3 liters of milk at most against the ones that we have in the world that are giving 50 liters of milk per cow per day. They still maintain a cow that is weighing not more than 100 or 120 kilograms of weight against the ones that we have in the world that are weighing 500, 600 to 700 kilograms that give more milk, that give more meat. If they know these things, they will definitely gradually venture into it. And this will solve their problem. They will not be moving. Their children will go to school. They will enjoy all the other social amenities like any other Nigerian. They will come over this. But this thing has to come as a process. You will not expect today there is a law, tomorrow stop rearing cattle. So where will they go to? What provision have you for them in the interim? For them to understand the law,
I think the laws are quite clear. It bans
to understand the benefits.
Okay, so I think essentially, maybe at the root of this for me, I think is understanding. Perhaps I might be wrong. And I think the laws are quite clear. The laws are banning open grazing, and that's having cattle on the roads, you know, in residential areas, as we have seen and we continue to see from time to time, and also to not have those cattle cross over into the farmlands of farmers, which has been a root cause of insecurity in a lot of areas. So I think the laws are quite clear on that, but the laws do not ban pastoralists from doing their business. It essentially tries to put up a framework. So from what you say, are you saying that pastoralists do not want to acquire land for ranching, for doing their business?
They will given the right opportunity. I told you most of the pastoralists we have in the country are smallholder farmers. Those 200-300 cows that you see family moving with them belongs to the entire family. If it is going to be shared, nobody will get more than 50 cows as his own. So with 50 cows, how are you going to establish a ranch with 50 cows? It's something that you don't know how to do it, you are not educated on it. How are you going to do it? So all that we say, well, if the law is about stopping cows from encroaching into farms, from roaming the streets in the cities, it's very good. We're always against this type of things. But let them be confined to a particular area where they will be grazing their cows, not encroaching into people's farmlands. Let these southern governors understand the dynamics of these guys. Let them know that they are also Nigerians. They have their rights and privileges to be protected just like the farmers. Let there be a system that can create understanding. Well, encroachment into farmlands is very wrong, because the farm to the farmer is dear, just like the cow is dear to the owner of the cow. So if you allow your cow to go and make a destruction into somebody's farm, we're always against it. Where we get them, we compel them to pay for that damage, because we will not allow this to happen as an association. So
but clearly, it seems that
it's about stopping these things, then we will have no quarrel with the law at all. But where the law is just like that of Benue State, that was promulgated with the intention, we believe, to chase out pastoralists out of Benue, this is our fears. This is always our fears, because we have seen a law in Benue that has not solved the problem up to today that we speak.
You know, Mr. Ngazama, we've seen policies of government banning, for example, hawking on the major roads. I mean, in Lagos, for example, there have been those policies banning motorcycles, at least a certain grade, from plying certain routes in the state. So we've seen some of those things essentially saying there are other ways to do your business. So for the motorcycles, there's a certain grade of motorcycle you have to get if you want to ply those routes. And I mean, we've seen people switching up, as it were. And for those who couldn't, they just moved away thinking, well, it is a law. I don't want to be caught breaking the law. So I'd like to know squarely now from you, as it stands, for example, with this law that is being developed in Lagos, would your members be abiding by that law?
Are cows supposed to be roaming the street in the cities? No. It's very wrong for cows to stray into somebody's farm deliberately and cause problem, or to be moving in the streets. It's very, very wrong. Let them be confined to a particular area where they will be rearing their cattle. We are against all these kind of things. If the law is about solving this kind of things, then we will have no problem with the law. But our fear is we had our bad experiences about the Benue law, where up till today, it has not solved the problem in Benue. So we fear the other southern governors not to emulate the Benue state law. But if it is a law that is peculiar with their environment, that can confine the pastoralists in a particular area where they will be grazing, get them in their large numbers, begin to improve their skills, begin to teach them how the modernized animal husbandry is being practiced today, then gradually as a process, they will learn. If they learn, I am sure they will not want to waste their time living in the forest with their children and everything, vulnerable area open for attack. They won't do that. They will also want their children to go to school just like any other. I am now here today by the grace of God because I went to school. Destiny brought me to where I am today. If not, I would have been supposed to be rearing my cow in the cattle, my cattle in the forest by now. But destiny, education, my parents put me in the school, so I am here today in channels granting interview. So they all want to do this. How many pastoralist children today are in the offices in Abuja out of the states working as civil servants? Doctors, engineers, mention anything, you find a Fulani man in it. So,
right.
So they all desire for these things. But because this thing that they are practicing is the only thing that they know as a source of livelihood for them to do. Let the southern governors understand this.
Is it
if the law is about solving, roaming the streets, stressing into farmlands, we are against these things. We don't like them. But
so correct me if I'm wrong,
like
Mr. Grazama. Are you saying
in the northern part of the country? I'm coming.
Okay, I need to take this to Mr. Atsen very soon, just so we can have a balanced conversation. Pardon me, but are you saying that your members will? Your members abiding by this law is conditional? Because you keep saying if. Is it conditional, or you'll go with it pending perhaps some sort of court ruling against it?
The problem with you media, you always want to put something into somebody's mouth. You don't want to be objective. You understood this thing very well, but still you are trying to create something that can give another impression to the public.
Well, Mr. Grazama, I don't think that is fair, because I asked a yes or no question earlier on.
The interest of our members who are the peaceful ones. We have no business with any criminal in this country.
Okay,
this is an association that has prominent, respected traditional rulers as board of trustees.
I understand, but I don't think that's fair. I essentially asked a straight question.
We fear a situation where our members will be put into an unnecessary prostration and loss, where they will become vulnerable for attack by use, because a guy hiding under a law that is promulgated against open grazing. So next time you see use and some communities beginning to attack pastoralists in those areas. But where it is very clear that there is a law stopping this and that. You pastoralists, for now, you are confined to this particular area to go and stay peacefully. Don't dare stress into somebody's farm. If you do that, this is the penalty. Don't dare roam the street in the cities. If you do that, this is the penalty. We'll come close to the government and help the government in achieving this, because we are not criminals. We are peaceful people. We are civilized. We represent those pastoralists who are peaceful doing their legitimate business. We don't speak for criminals because we are not one. But because our members are everywhere in this country, that is why we always diplomatic in our presentation. We always guide our statements because we don't want to make statements that will put our members living in those areas into unnecessary troubles. So we always try to create understanding. We always try to be objective in what we are doing. We always try to create understanding so that the governors in those areas can understand that our members are not violent. Our members are there looking for faster for their hearts. If a government can come up with something that can fetch revenue for her, we are not against it. I am from Yobe State. Yobe State has promulgated cattle tax now.
Mr. Gazama, well, I hope you will not say that the media again is cutting you short, but we need to take this back to Mr. Atsen. And I essentially wanted us to leave with a sense that at least we understand your position. So moving forward, we can have at least a well-rounded conversation. But Mr. Atsen, you've been following this conversation, and it will appear to me, at least, that there's some lack of understanding, at least understanding the positions of the parties. So, I mean, the pastoralists have their view of these laws, why these laws are being promulgated, thinking, I mean, there's some political undertone to it and the rest. And the governors, of course, have their views as well. Is there a way around this in law?
Well, just as was stated earlier on, the governors have a responsibility as chief security officers to bring about or make policies that will bring about the peace and order and good governance of their various states. And we have identified open grazing as one of the threats to security in most states of the Federation. But we've not really situated the solution in proper perspective or within its proper context. Now, in the course of discussions here, it was established that there are grazing areas up north, even though some of them are forest reserves, which are misconstrued to be grazing areas. But yes, there are grazing reserves which have been abandoned, which are in the state of decay. Now, what we should be agitating our minds on is how to revive these areas, as the president has directed, and settle some of these pastoralists there. If you look at the map of Nigeria, there's more space up north than down south. As you go down southward, the maps keeps shrinking. Land is more scarce downward than upward. So why can't we take advantage of these resources that we have up north, rehabilitate these areas? The cattle have used or grazed on the areas up north, and they have moved down south without doing much more. I mean, we're going to have a repeat in the south, what we now have in the north. Because with time, they will overgraze and finish all the forest. And some of these forests are protected resources. So maybe instead of hammering on southern governors, pushing all the responsibilities and blame on them, focus should be made on the northern governors, on the northern states. You have a responsibility. You're more affiliated to this, most of the pastoralists that will be affected culturally and in so many ways. So they should be charged to rise up to their responsibilities and provide all these structures so that some of these concerns will be addressed. I mean, Magban in Lagos made a statement to the effect that if this law is put in place, that the cost of a cow will get up to about 2 million naira or so. I mean, that is business. If I, as a state governor, let's say in Kaduna or Katsina State, invest money in creating a grazing area, I should be able to charge some kind of tax or something before a cow will be moved from my state to, let's say, Ebonyi State or Ogun State. So if that will come to 1 million per cow, in my mind, it's better than the lives that are being lost on a daily basis, destruction of properties, and lack of harmony. I mean, right now, as we talk, we didn't talk about the banditry that has crippled activities completely in states like Katsina and Zamfara. All this started as a result of cattle rustling, clashes with farmers, you know, and all those things. That was how it started. But today we have a security threat that is, as we speak, much more than Boko Haram threats as far as banditry, terrorism basically is concerned. You know, so we need to look at these issues from the foundations instead of touching on its branches.
Just to say also that we did invite a member of the Lagos State House of Assembly, but he wasn't able to make it to the program. And it's to give a perspective into the thinking of the Lagos State government in terms of their passage and also perhaps explain how they intend to cover the challenges faced by the cattle breeders who will be most affected by the law which has just been passed in Lagos. But gentlemen, I don't know if we still have time for closing words. It looks like we're totally out of time. But I want to ask, because you have said that if this was just about restricting movement to a certain area and not, prohibiting people from, especially the cattle, from coming into the city, that it would have been more understandable. Someone will say that in Abuja, for instance, the FCT, which is especially in the heart of the FCT, we still see cattle roaming around. I mean, what is the engagement like with your members when it comes to, the herding of cattle within the city center?
Those cattle that you see in the city center belongs to the big men in this town. They do not belong to the pastoralists, because we have been working with FCT for years to stop these things. And whenever we caught a pastoralist moving with his cow within Abuja, we ensure that there's a penalty on him. We don't allow this. We have been working with FCT for so long on this. But those that you see roaming the wild, still in the city, they live in the city. They belong to some big men here in the city, not the pastoralists. But they have the services of the pastoralists to go rear, come back to the house and lock them up.
So sometimes it is not about, it's not about the resources really, because if they are big men, they should be able to afford ranches. It's sometimes about impunity.
Oh yes, I am with you on this. Oh yes, but my call on the southern governors, they can use this to turn it as a revenue venture. Like I started saying, in Yobe State, we have introduced cattle tax. And this cattle tax will help the Yobe State government in so many things, because it will help in checking incoming foreign pastoralists, distinguishing them from the residence ones from the incoming ones. It will also help in boosting the revenue of the local governments and the state government. It will help in checking the activities of herders. It will also help in confining them in a particular area, so that when there is a farm destruction, you know which family is responsible for destroying whose farm. Then get him pay, impose penalty on him. So the southern governors, we are not blaming the southern governors for this, but all we are saying, there has to be understanding. Let them know the dynamics of this pastoralists, so that they could come up with something that can work for all of us. They can turn this into a revenue venture. They can do it. And the pastoralists will be willing to pay. If you will confine them to a particular area, give them water, there is grass, tell them, we are going to charge you this, they will stay. And it is only and only when you get them in their large numbers, then you begin to also teach them other skills, educate them on the modernized system of animal husbandry. So even in the northern part of the country today, where we have all these grazing reserves, I am telling you, today we have about 80% of the arable land in this country that is still free.
So something
for grazing.
Well,
so
something.
I see no reason why we should be quarreling and fighting on something that we can solve. We have enough land, we have the resources, the pastoralists are there, livestock, if it can be put in the right place, it will help in even boosting the revenue of the federal government. Well, so why can't we do something that can help the government of both North and the South? We are not against all these things. Once it is done in good faith, where our members will be protected, they will be confined to a particular area. What is our problem?
Big question, Mr. Usman Ngazama. I know that this conversation will certainly continue. The bill has not been signed, or the law has not yet been signed into law. I don't know what stage, when it has been passed. What stage is it at before it is signed? It's still a bill, is it?
It is still a bill.
Okay, but it's been passed by the Lagos State House of Assembly, awaiting assent of the Lagos State Governor. We'll see how that conversation is extended when the bill is eventually signed into law. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Bolos Atson is the chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association here in Abuja, and Usman Baba Ngazama is the national secretary, Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria. Thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Just to state again that a member of the Lagos State House of Assembly was invited and wasn't able to make it to the program. But hopefully, who knows what will happen in the coming days. We have to take a break at this point. We'll be back shortly to have another discussion on another topic. Please stay with us.
Well, we're turning our attention to, well, it's a related matter, really, and it's security. Just yesterday, some background, a lecturer at this Mandamfodi University presented a paper on his research into banditry in the country, and it was titled, "I Am a Bandit, a Decade of Research in Zamfara Bandit Den." And part of the highlights of that paper was, that research paper was the fact that he says there are 120 bandit gangs, and each of them have 500 AK-47 rifles. So if you multiply that 50 by 6, that's from Zamfara to Sokoto, Katsina, Kaduna, Kebbi, and Niger. You can do the math, right? 500 times 6, and then 120 gangs. That's 60,000 AK-47 rifles with 120 bandit gangs in Nigeria. And that has, again, brought up a conversation around firearms. On the one hand, the proliferation, not of even light firearms, AK-47, those are heavy firearms, and what the citizens can do. Some governors saying, protect yourself. Some saying, you might need to arm yourselves, or at least the interpretation which some people have gotten from that. Well, there's someone who has been working on firearms and, you know, the kind of laws that should be amended such that the procurement of firearms is perhaps stricter, the kind of levies or the kind of punishment for acquiring firearms illegally as well was put into that. But let's speak with Honorable Adijaro Adeogun this morning. He joins us virtually on the program. He is the Deputy Chairman, House Committee on National Security and Intelligence. Thank you for joining us today, Honorable. Well, I'm sure you've seen the recent trend since we last had a conversation with you on this program. So first, let me ask, how is that amendment going at the National Assembly? Honorable Adeogun, are you there? Okay, I guess we'll work on that one.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, great. I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Thank you for having me. Like you asked, how far has the bill gone? It's gone through the second reading. and it's been referred to one or two committees. I think the process of reconsidering and then putting the dots and the T's together before it can be represented to the House. The process is ongoing. And I'm sure before November, it will be represented back to the House and then it will pass.
So in the context of that research paper I just referenced, 60,000 AK-47 rifles in the hands of 120 bandit gangs, how does that amendment, I mean, if it does, how does it remedy that challenge which we have, which I referenced?
I think my position has been that there should be some kind of equality of forces. You need to balance. If you have 60,000 rifles in the hands of criminals and then the law-abiding citizens just have practically at best guns, you find that they're not equally poised, and it gives the criminals a lot of advantage. So I think what we're saying is law-abiding citizens, once they meet the prescribed conditions, should be allowed to bear weapons. Let them be able to protect themselves. Let them be able to deter, because deterrence is important in security.
So if you could just walk us through some of the highlights of that bill. I don't want to take it for granted that our viewers are abreast of what is contained in that amendment. So in terms of acquiring firearms, the age of acquiring it, the whole process, what do you seek to achieve?
What we're considering is the Firearms Act, which is F28 of the Law of Federation mentioned 2004. It's an existing act. So what we're doing is amending it to strengthen it and not, introduce certain new provisions. The law, as said now, actually allows Nigerians to bear weapons. All it does is not describe what is prohibited and what is not prohibited. So what we're amending is to provide one for the age. The previous act, the existing act, provides for 17 years and we're raising it to 18. And then now we're making surveillance much easier by requesting for a national identification number, BVN, and also for other things that make identification and surveillance easier. Then we're introducing some other things that will ensure that anyone who is licensed to bear a weapon should be trained to bear a weapon. You have to belong to a rifle club. You have to at least have proficiency certificate that's renewable every year, so that it's not like you have a weapon and you can't use it. We just feel like weapons in the hand of an untrained person is as dangerous as being in the hands of a lunatic. Then we're making provision for local production of firearms, because as I now, the Nigerian Firearms Act does not encourage local production. The truth is, we've seen weapons being manufactured in Benue, manufactured in institutes. We think that the law should mainstream this local production so that we will reduce the need for illicit weapon manufacturing and then the need for people to import illegal weapons into our country. I think those are the major highlights.
There are always questions about acquiring firearms, and people will be quick to reference what they've seen play out in the United States, for example, the whole gun violence and the rest. And I'd just like you to touch on some of the measures you have included in that amendment to ensure stricter monitoring in terms of who can get a firearm, psychological evaluation. I know we rarely talk about that, but it's quite important. So what are the measures put in place in that amendment to ensure that only the right people can get access, or people that are mentally or psychologically able to handle firearms acquire those firearms?
The first thing is that it is not, firearms license is not as of right the conditions that must be met. Like I said, to join a rifle club, it's not every Dick, Jack, and Harry can just walk into a rifle club for membership. And then it has to be approved by the Inspector General of Police. Even for guns, for nozzle loading weapons, you still need approval of the governor of the state and the commissioner of the police in each state. So it's one that does not allow anybody to bear weapons without showing responsibility, showing the capability to restrict excessive use of such weapons. So I think the whole idea is we want to ensure that only people who have the right psychological state of mind, people who can actually be trusted to use it as prescribed by the law, will be licensed to bear weapons.
Perhaps to get some sort of psychological evaluation and maybe a pass from psychological institution. How long is the duration? I mean, is it in the past 6 months, past 1 year? Because that's important, just to clear that one.
Yeah.
I didn't get that, sorry.
No, I didn't quite get your question.
Oh, the question is about psychological evaluation, which was a previous one. Will they have to...
Yeah, because it has to be not more than 6 months psychological certificate obtained from a government-recognized designated hospital. So it has to be from facilities that are recognized by the inspection of police or designated by any appropriate arm of government. So it's not just anybody walking into any private clinic to obtain a certificate, no.
So in actual fact, Honorable, it doesn't make acquiring a weapon easier, does it?
The intention is not to make the acquisition easier. It's to streamline the process so that only those who are able to, those who meet all the requirements are able to obtain it, at least be able to protect themselves. And the flip side is that at some point increases the penalty for illegal possession of weapons. So it's not like anybody possesses a weapon without a license can go scot-free. No. You mentioned 60,000 rifles in the hands of people. I think the law makes the penalty more punitive so that such persons, if caught, will not have the difficulties, will face time in prosecuting them.
So in prosecuting, for example, if these bandits are arrested, we'll have to use that same Firearms Act of 2004 to prosecute them. And you think that the penalties are not strict enough in that one, right?
Yes, I think we're just actually making it stricter and then making sure that the courts can actually use the law as amended to actually give them stricter jail terms.
Okay, so let's see if we can balance this equation and still referring to those 60,000 rifles. Of course, we'll expect to get some clarity or some concurrence or otherwise from government regarding this, because I know that government, of course, has some data on this as well. So 60,000 AK-47 in the hands of bandits. We don't know how much we have in the hands of law-abiding citizens, as it were. So clearly there needs to be a balance of force. Does this law account for what kind of weapon you can get? I mean, what kind of level does it make? I mean, does it make provisions for acquiring an AK-47, for example, or just for, light arms? What does it say?
AK-47 is a light arm, so it's not about light arms. It's actually said about concealable weapons. Any weapon that is automatic or semi-automatic is not licensable. So AK-47 is an automatic rifle, so it's not licensable. It only provides, for weapons that can be held and publicly known. So you can't even apply for a license to hold a pistol because it's concealable. So we want to say which people who bear arms can, when they're bearing it, others will know that this person is armed and dangerous. So it's not something that can be concealed. And then we'll specify the velocity, which means how far can it go. We'll specify even the length of the weapon that can be, be licensed. So it's got to be up to 16 cm, so that it's long enough to be held in a bag and not short enough to be held on a body.
Okay, I'll also come to some of the, downsides that people have referenced. But does this balance the equation, as it were, eventually, if you have an aggressor with an AK-47 and the best you can afford or the best you can get under the law is a Dane gun or a simple rifle?
No, a double-barrel weapon can be licensed. A pump-action rifle can be licensed. And you see, our intention is not to proliferate weapons. It's to create deterrence. It's to give the other party, the law-abiding citizen, a chance. So the whole idea is, if someone is, coming to attack you and able to at least tell the person, delay his attack, it gives you a chance to life better than you just being harmless.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And the point is, AK-47 against a shotgun, I mean, really, what chances are there? Which is why I still say, does that balance the equation well enough? Because an AK-47 will always be an AK-47.
You see, sometimes you have to understand about weaponry. It is not the capacity of the weapon. It is the ability of the user. If you have someone who is well-versed in the usage of firearms and is bearing a pump-action weapon with 6 rounds, I think he probably can outgun a man with AK-47 with very little or no expertise.
Yet again, there's a condition attached to that. But I'd like us to look at this, the whole scheme of things. And I'm glad you said that this is not to even worsen the proliferation of firearms which we already have? Because people reference how we got here. The fact that, I mean, they reference people who had to acquire arms as a result of maybe cattle rustling, some for political reason. And when that ended, they had to look for ways to use those firearms, which is why we're seeing all the kidnapping and the rest. But it's good you say that this is not to even tip us further down that line. But in terms of the solution to the security challenge we have, there have been questions as to whether or not the problem is firearms or the lack of it, firepower and the rest. So to what extent really will this solve the insecurity challenge we have in the country? I mean, you have done some work in that area. Just how much of this problem will this solve, and how do we need to even close the gap that will be left?
You see, I think I want to make reference to the professor at ABU that you said did the research and identified the 120 bandit groups. It took him 10 years, which means the problem has been there for 10 years. What did we do for 8 out of those 10 years? We did absolutely nothing. The problem with us is that we allow problems to fester. Little things that we can solve at an early stage, we do nothing, allow them to go. And then even when government try to intervene, rather than confronting the bandits, what states like Zamfara, Katsina did was rather invited them to dinner and then offered to pay them on some kind of fake amnesty. So what we're doing is we escalate situations rather than solving problems. So going forward, we need to actually be proactive. Intelligence hasn't actually done enough for us in Nigeria. And where they even have intelligence, the action agencies are not acting as fast as possible. We need to take quick actions. We need to at least eliminate problems at early stages before they fester into something bigger. I think that's where we should start from. We're doing a lot now trying to, over the past few days, I think the military has been striking them in the northwest of Nigeria in Zamfara. The action should have been done like 2 years ago, when we won't require this much energy, wouldn't require this much force. So we need to actually be quicker at in action.
So what changed? Referencing what we've seen, I heard happen in Zamfara in just past few days. I mean, we didn't recruit, I imagine we didn't change the whole army or the whole military, or I don't think something hugely remarkable happened, except perhaps the acquisition of the Super Tucano jet. So what quite changed with that one, such that we're seeing the results we're seeing?
First, I mentioned Zamfara. Let's take Zamfara for example. Don't forget that the governor of Zamfara State actually granted them amnesty at some point. So the grant of amnesty delays the actions of the security forces. All he's basically said is, I've solved the problem. So I think maybe for some reasons, the agencies themselves believe what he has done. They felt it would work, but it never worked. That should not have happened in the first instance. So I think what has changed is the political dimension to it. Moving it from what a governor can just feel like, okay, it's my state, I have a right to take decisions, even if they were the wrong decisions, to the government feeling like this has gone bigger than you. And I know that the governor of Zamfara State himself has realized that it's bigger than him, and has actually come to terms with the security, with the military and the police on the need to actually be sterner and taking bigger actions.
Referring to, or at least seeing what played out in Zamfara, the governor of Katsina also recently coming out to say that, well, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe he will not have granted that sort of amnesty to the bandits. Seeing what has played out afterwards. And I can't help but remember that in Borno State as well, you have a lot of terrorists, or ex-terrorists this time around, surrendering. And there's been that debate about what to do with the terrorists or ex-terrorists, as the case may be. And on the back of the Katsina State governor saying, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe he will not have granted amnesty. Are the dynamics different here? And what do you think should be done in the case of Borno, which has been the epicenter of terrorism in Nigeria?
I'll advise caution. Here, there are two sides to it. One, the assumption is that the actions of the military in the Northeast has made the area inhabitable for terrorists, and that's why they're coming out. But the truth is, even where they come out, do you just pat them in the back and thank them for surrendering their weapons, or you actually let them face the full wrath of the law? A criminal is a criminal. It's like someone robs or kidnaps or kills someone, and then it comes out, okay, I'm no longer doing it. Nigeria is not a church. It's only the church that can forgive. Nigeria as a state should not forgive criminality. It should actually let the law take the decision. So what's happening in Borno State is that we adopted the wrong approach. And the truth is, we will set in place another ball, another roll of the dice. These guys are going to come out. I mean, I've had cause to interact with young people, in some part of the country, people who says that the weapon is like a pen. The journalist does not drop his pen unless he's given that means of livelihood. So the man with a weapon will never drop his weapon unless it's found that means of livelihood, because that's the only thing they know how to do. That's the only way they know how to make money. They're not going to leave it. So, just welcoming them back because they said, what is the proof that they have actually not changed strategy? We need to be more careful.
I was just a little curious as to how, I don't know whether you're optimistic about regulation. When you look at how our regulatory agencies have run a number of schemes that are really important to us, that has to do largely with identity, for instance, a driver's license, national identity card, and a number of other schemes. How optimistic are you that with regulation we can get gun ownership right? I don't know.
Okay, the question I ask is what is the alternative? Should we just hold our hands and do nothing? We need to look at what BVN has done to the banking sector. You have to look at what NIN is doing. They haven't been perfect, but it streamlines everything. Before, people could have 10,000 bank accounts and then they can't be linked together. With BVN, they can be linked now. And I think the same thing that BVN has done to the banking sector is what regulation can do to weapons control.
Yeah, because you've also talked about getting psychological evaluation in a place where, documents can be forged. COVID-19 tests as, mandatory as they were and as scrutinized as they were. And, in terms of even standardization, what was required of us and what was required by other countries, we continue to put our foot down. But still, people have found a way to forge, in some instances, things that are mandatory. How do you think that we're going to get round, making people do the right things if really we're going to go down this route of gun ownership and looking at how vital, this is, because we're talking about lives here.
I think, part of the problem we have in Nigeria is over-dependence on paper. Now, if you go to a medical doctor that's approved by government and it issues a certificate online directly to the agency, directly to the authorities, there'll be no need to forge because it's paperless. Nobody gets to know what's written. So we need to actually move beyond this paper thing that allows forgery to move into one to which actually deal with authorities using communications, using availability of the internet.
I'm glad that you're thinking through a lot of the loopholes, because there are definitely questions that will arise. Would you say that it would be permissible for Nigerians to, say, carry their guns about, say, for instance, those who are traveling by road and maybe they say they have the fear of kidnappers, will it be permissible for them to have their guns on them, or should they just keep them at home?
No, your weapon should be like your laptop. Anywhere you're going, you go with it. It's for protection, so you don't know where you could be attacked, so you should be able to protect yourself anyway.
You don't see it as a potential problem?
I see it as deterring anyway. Let everybody who has a weapon be able to bear their weapon anywhere they're going. Even if you'll be on a plane, submit it the same way government agents are able to submit their weapons when they're getting on aircrafts. Now, it shouldn't be a problem. You see, where the problem arises is where people conceal, where it's not known that you're bearing it. If you're bearing it, if you're carrying it on the road and you get a police checkpoint and they're able to show that you're licensed, to show that you're genuinely licensed to bear a weapon, it won't be a problem. What's the sense of having a weapon if it's in your bedroom and then you're attacked along Lagos-Ibadan Expressway? It's worthless then.
What sort of reception has the amendments which you propose to this bill generated? Do you think you're going to get the support needed to pass the bill?
I think it's more of the support of Nigerians because, before passage, it will have to go through public hearing. So we will get to know from members of the public But from, after the newspaper reports, I know, I've got a lot of calls from Nigerians who are actually happy that such a thing is happening because I feel like it's something that's long overdue.
Well, it's remarkable that you talk about the support of Nigerians. It's very I was very specific with the question for a reason, because much as a bill might gain popular support amongst the generality of the people, you will still need the support of your members to be able to see it through. So what sort of support have you received from amongst your members?
Well, I mean, I've spoken to quite a number of people and they're happy about it, but we must remember that the legislature is a place where there's lobbying. So it now depends on the capability of the sponsor of the bill. In this case, I think we actually have two bills that were consolidated. And then so we're going to get together and ensure that, we talk to members and convince them on the need for the improvement in the thing they have.
Well, we'll see how things eventually pan out on the floor of the House and also in general the National Assembly, because we do know that, as Kaide did point out, when it's passed in the House, you will still need concurrence from the Senate. But we have to thank you very much at this point for coming on the program this morning. Honorable Adejoro Adeogun is the Deputy Chairman, House Committee on National Security and Intelligence. Well, let's take some of your mails. Thank you once again for coming on the program. Well, let's quickly take some of your mails now, and we have a few. Abake Adetunji talking about open grazing bill, saying, my main question is, who owns the cows? These are private owners and businesses. Do we allow the pig farmers or poultry farmers to also have free ranging? Business owners of cows should establish ranches. That is from Abake Adetunji.
Well, Olagunjo Oladele has this one. A logical solution to the problem is usually illogical to those concerned. At the end of the day, we all have to respect a society that wants the best for its people.
And Festus Akimboyewa says the prohibition of open grazing by some states should be applauded, as it will protect our farmers, herders, farmlands, environment, and prevent diseases. All the states that have prohibited open grazing by law must be prepared to enforce it and prosecute offenders. Failure to prosecute offenders will undermine the effectiveness of the law.
Well, take a look at Professor Chris Anagana's mail. Netherlands makes over $100 billion from dairy products yearly, which aggregates over 4 years of our national budget. They don't practice open grazing, he says.
And Dr. Ekpemosa has this one on anti-open grazing bill, says, as a solution to the problem of open grazing, the state government should develop ranching at commercial levels. Public, I don't know if there's a public-private partnership, but it says public-public partnership arrangements are needed to drive the strategic objective of state-led ranching as a conflict resolution alternative. This should entail developing a special purpose vehicle to manage ranching business within states. This vehicle should accommodate all stakeholders as equity participants. Well, different suggestions now to, see how this could truly bring peace, because I imagine that one of the reasons why why this law has gained popularity is because people desire peace and safety of lives and property. So let us see what eventually transpires. Let's hope that this will further conversations and dialogue and eventually bring the desired peace to the many parts of this country.
Well, that's the hope, Mokwe. Really, that's the hope. But then, we always say hope is not a strategy, right? Well, keep our fingers crossed. Thank you so much for joining us on the program this morning. It's Friday. We'll make the most of the weekend. I'm Kayode Okikilu.
I'm Mokwe Ogunyi, so thank you so much for watching.